He took a beggar to his ex's wedding, and what she did left everyone in shock. The scorching sun hit the dusty road with no mercy. The wind carried the smell of fresh hay mixed with the scent of dry earth, typical of the countryside. In the middle of that empty road, the sound of horse hooves echoed, followed by the loud, screeching noise of truck tires kicking up clouds of dust. Everything was supposed to be perfect. The most anticipated wedding in the entire region was about to happen. A wedding everyone would talk about for years. A wedding where appearances meant everything. But no one, absolutely no one, was prepared for what was about to happen. As the crowd gathered in front of the grand wooden chapel, adorned with white flowers, silk fabrics, and golden chandeliers hanging from the oak beams, whispers ran from one mouth to another. People wore their best cowboy hats, polished boots, and belts with gold buckles. But suddenly, everything stopped. Gasps, murmurs, eyebrows raised, hands covering mouths. A pickup truck, large, imposing, perfectly polished, stopped right at the entrance. The door opened slowly. A black cowboy boot stepped onto the dusty ground. Then the edge of tailored gray pants appeared, followed by a hand adjusting a perfectly aligned silver belt. And finally, there he was. Tall, handsome, strong, an aura of power surrounding him. His hair, perfectly gray, shone under the sunlight. His hat tilted forward, casting a shadow over his sharp eyes that held a storm inside. His jaw clenched, his fists tight. His presence alone was enough to suffocate anyone nearby. People started whispering louder. Is he really coming? No, he wouldn't dare. Oh, but he did. The groom, standing at the altar, turned his head. His face turned pale. His smile vanished. The bride, dressed in an elegant white gown, nearly dropped her bouquet. Her hands trembled, her lips pressed together, and her eyes widened in disbelief. But that wasn't the worst part, because a few seconds later, the other door of the truck opened. A small, fragile foot stepped down, a foot wearing an old, worn-out shoe, patched and covered in dust. A simple dress, faded and torn at the edges, appeared next. And then, a young woman. Her hair was messy but long and beautiful. Her skin was tanned by the sun, and her eyes, oh, her eyes, burned with something no one in that place had ever seen before. Strength, dignity, and a fire that nothing could extinguish. She adjusted her tiny, ripped jacket and then felt it. The hand of the man, strong, firm. He offered his arm to her, and without hesitation, she took it. Together, they started walking, slowly, step by step, toward the altar, towards the bride, towards the groom, towards everyone who had ever looked at her with disgust, and at him with pity. The whispers became louder. Is he crazy? Who is that woman? A beggar. Isn't she the one who begs near the gas station? What the hell is he thinking bringing someone like her? But neither of them flinched. Neither of them looked down. Neither of them showed a single sign of fear. Because for him, this wasn't just about crashing a wedding. This wasn't just about revenge. No, this was about proving a point. And for her, this wasn't just about being there. This was about showing the world that she wasn't invisible, that her worth was not measured by her clothes, by her past, or by where she came from. As they walked through the aisle, people stepped back. The bride's face twisted between rage and terror. The groom clenched his jaw so hard that his neck veins bulged, until finally both stopped. Right there, a few steps away from the altar. The man tipped his hat slightly, looking directly into the bride's eyes, and with a voice as firm as steel and sharp as a blade, he said, "Well, I guess I wasn't invited, but here I am." The entire place gasped. The tension was suffocating, and everyone knew this was just the beginning. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Not a single breath, not a single whisper, just silence. Heavy, suffocating, brutal. The bride stood frozen, gripping her bouquet so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her face twisted between disbelief, humiliation, and pure rage. The groom clenched his fists, his face red, jaw trembling, unable to process what was unfolding right before his eyes. But the man who everyone once whispered about as the most powerful, the most untouchable in that region, stood tall, calm, unshaken. His silver hair shone beneath his cowboy hat, his boots sinking slightly into the dusty ground. His grip around the young woman's arm was steady, protective, unbreakable. The beggar girl kept her head high, her shoulders square, her chest forward. Her hands trembled just slightly, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. It was the weight of knowing that every eye was on her. Not with pity, not with disgust, but with shock. The whispers started again, this time louder, this time mixed with gasps and nervous laughter. Is this a joke? He really brought her. Does he have no shame? This is madness, complete madness. Ignoring everyone, the man walked forward, slowly but firmly, until he stood face to face with the groom. There was a long, tense silence, the kind of silence that feels like thunder pressing against your chest. The groom stepped forward, his lips curling with disgust. What the hell do you think you're doing? He spat, his voice shaking between fury and humiliation. The man didn't even blink. He adjusted his hat, narrowed his eyes, and replied with a cold, sharp tone. Oh, didn't you hear? I came to congratulate you on finding someone brave enough to marry a coward like you. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Some covered their mouths. Others turned their faces, pretending not to look, but everyone was watching. The bride opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked at the groom, then at the man, then at the girl by his side. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her face was burning red. Then, her eyes locked onto the girl, up and down, judging every inch. The torn dress, the dirty shoes, the messy hair, and the worst part, the dignity in her posture. The bride hissed, "How dare you show your face here? Dressed like this?" The girl didn't flinch. She didn't lower her gaze. Instead, she straightened even more. Her voice was soft but firm, steady like the earth beneath them. "I came because I was invited," she replied. The groom laughed sarcastically, running a hand through his slicked hair. "Invited? By who?" "Him. This is pathetic. You don't belong here. Look at you. Look at yourself." The man stepped forward, closing the gap, his chest practically touching the groom's. His jaw clenched. His eyes were fire. "Careful," he warned, his voice low but filled with threat. "Careful how you speak to her, because the only one who doesn't belong here is you." The tension snapped like a whip. People gasped. Some grabbed their partners. Others backed away, as if expecting a fight to break out right then and there. The bride trembled. Her eyes darted between them, then scanned the guests, realizing everyone was watching. Not her, not the wedding, not the decorations, the flowers, the band. Everyone was watching them. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. This day wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to them. The air grew heavier. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, whispering behind trembling hands, their eyes darting between the bride, the groom, the powerful man, and the beggar girl standing proudly at his side. The bride clenched her fists, trying to control the tremor running through her entire body. Her face was a storm of rage, humiliation, and disbelief. This is insane," she muttered, her voice cracking. The groom stepped forward, barely able to control his shaking hands. His lips curled with disgust, but behind his fake arrogance was fear. Pure fear. "Get out," he hissed, pointing toward the exit. "Both of you. You're not welcome here. You're ruining my day." The man raised an eyebrow, his eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his cowboy hat. A bitter smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, I thought we were welcome. After all, I received an invitation, even if it wasn't written on paper." His gaze sharpened. An invitation, written in betrayal. Gasps filled the air. Some guests turned their faces, pretending to look elsewhere, but their ears were wide open. Others leaned in, clutching their partner's arms, hanging on every word. The bride's face went pale, her mouth slightly open, but no words came out. Her hands gripped the bouquet so tightly, the flowers were beginning to crumble. The girl, standing beside the man, felt her heart pounding against her chest. Her hands trembled, but still, her head stayed high. Her eyes locked on the bride, filled not with anger, but with a quiet kind of strength that was impossible to ignore. Then the man's voice echoed again, lower this time, deeper, sharper. "Let's be honest. None of these people are here for your love story. They're here for the spectacle, to see how far someone can go, to pretend happiness while standing on the ruin of others. The bride's breathing grew fast, erratic. "Shut up. Just shut up," she whispered, her voice barely escaping her lips. But the man wasn't done. Not even close. His hand tightened around the girl's arm, not as a restraint, but as support, as protection, as a statement. "You see," he continued, letting his eyes scan the room, "I thought about letting this day pass. I thought maybe dignity means walking away from people like you." But then his gaze dropped to the girl. Then I realized, no, dignity isn't walking away. Dignity is showing up, standing tall, and reminding every single person here. His eyes snapped back to the bride and the groom, cold as steel. "That I may have lost something, but what I never lost was my worth." The girl felt her throat tighten, her vision blur with the sting of tears, but she held them back. She wouldn't cry. Not today. Not here. Not in front of people who spent their entire lives looking down on her. The groom clenched his fists so tight, his knuckles went white. "You think you can come here, embarrass me, ruin my wedding?" He barked, voice cracking. "You're pathetic. Both of you." But before the man could reply, the girl, for the first time, stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the air like a blade. "We're not here to ruin anything," she said, staring straight into the groom's eyes. "You did that, all by yourself." The crowd gasped. Some even dared to whisper, "She's right. Did you hear that? She has guts." The bride's face twisted, her lips trembling. Get out right now," she shrieked, her voice breaking into a hysterical scream. "I won't let you do this. I won't let you humiliate me in front of everyone." But no matter how loud she screamed, it was too late. The attention was no longer hers. The spotlight no longer belonged to the bride, nor the groom. It belonged to them. The bride's scream echoed through the air like thunder, but no one moved. Not a single guest dared to step forward. Not a single voice rose to defend her. Everyone was frozen, caught between shock, fear, and a strange, burning curiosity. The man, standing tall, adjusted his cowboy hat slowly, his expression so calm it was almost terrifying. His silver hair caught the sunlight, and his piercing eyes scanned the crowd like a predator watching a field full of prey. Then, his voice sliced through the tension. "Funny, you scream about humiliation. You scream as if you've ever known what it feels like to be humiliated, betrayed, discarded." His gaze locked on the bride. "But don't worry. Today, you'll learn." The groom's face turned red, fists clenched, chest rising and falling as if he was barely holding himself together. "Enough. Get out, or I swear," he shouted. But the man didn't even flinch. Instead, he took a slow step forward, pulling the girl gently with him. His presence was so commanding that even the groom stumbled back slightly. "Or what?" he asked, voice cold as ice. "What will you do? Throw me out? Go ahead. Try." Gasps burst through the crowd. The tension was unbearable. Some guests looked at each other, silently debating whether they should leave or stay and watch how this living telenovela would unfold. The girl held her breath, her heart pounding so loud it echoed in her ears. But she didn't let go. Her hand tightened around his arm. Her posture never wavered. "Do you think bringing," the bride spat, pointing at the girl with a shaking finger, "makes you look strong? Do you think this will hurt me?" Her voice cracked with desperation, but her pride refused to let her break. "No," the man said sharply. "I didn't bring her to hurt you." He turned slightly, his eyes softening as he glanced at the girl by his side. "I brought her because she's worth more than every person in this room combined." A wave of whispers exploded across the chapel. "Did you hear that?" "No, he didn't." "Oh my God, this is insane." The bride's jaw dropped. Her hands trembled, so much the bouquet finally slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. The girl stared at him, eyes wide, her throat tightening. No one, absolutely no one had ever said something like that about her. The groom growled through clenched teeth. This is ridiculous. You're embarrassing yourself, parading this filthy, this nobody, in front of everyone." The girl's chest tightened. Her hands trembled, her vision blurred. But then she felt it. The man's hand, strong, warm, wrapping around hers, squeezing it tightly. His thumb gently brushed over her trembling fingers. A simple gesture, but it sent a wave of strength surging through her. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and looked the groom dead in the eyes. "You're right," she said softly. "I am nobody. At least, I was nobody to people like you. But today," she took a deep breath. Her voice grew stronger, sharper. "Today, you'll learn that the people you call nobody are the ones you should fear the most." The entire place gasped. A few women put their hands over their mouths. Some of the older men shook their heads, whispering things like, "This is unbelievable. Never seen anything like it." The bride stepped back, nearly tripping over her dress. This can't be happening," she stammered. "This was supposed to be my day." The man chuckled darkly. "Oh, it was until you decided to betray the wrong person." And then, as if fate itself was waiting for that exact moment, something even more shocking happened. A voice from the back of the chapel yelled, "Is it true? Is it true what they say?" Everyone turned. The doors of the chapel swung open. A figure stood there, someone whose presence would change everything. The heavy wooden doors of the chapel slammed against the walls as they flew open. A loud gasp swept through the guests like a wave crashing onto shore. Heads turned. Mouths dropped open. People exchanged terrified, shocked glances. Standing in the doorway was an older woman, dressed in plain clothes, with deep lines carved into her face. Not by age, but by hardship, by pain, by betrayal. Her eyes, however, were sharp, piercing, filled with fire. "Is it true?" she yelled again, her voice trembling with fury. "Is it true what everyone's been whispering?" The bride's face went pale as chalk. Her lips trembled. Her hands started shaking uncontrollably. No, no," she stammered, taking a step back. What are you doing here?" The groom's face turned red, then pale, then red again. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. His breathing became shallow. The older woman stormed down the aisle, her boots slamming against the floor, her finger pointing straight at the bride. "Answer me, you snake. Answer me now. Is it true you lied? You deceived us all. That you destroyed this man's life for this?" She roared, gesturing wildly at the groom. Gasps, murmurs, whispers flooding the air. What is she talking about? What lie? Oh no, oh no. This is about to explode. The man crossed his arms, leaning back slightly, watching, almost as if he had expected this storm to arrive. The bride's breathing hitched, her face contorted with panic. I don't know what you're talking about," she tried to say, but her voice broke halfway through. "Don't you dare lie to me now." The older woman roared. "You promised me. You swore that you loved my son, that you weren't like the others, that you weren't after his land, his fortune, his name." The guests gasped louder. Some turned to look at the man in the gray suit, whose face was a mask of steel. His jaw clenched, his eyes burning with restrained fury, but his posture remained dignified, towering, unbreakable. The groom stepped forward, trying to put himself between the two women. "Enough," he barked. "This is none of your business, old woman. Get out of here before I—" But he didn't finish the sentence, because the older woman spun on him like a rattlesnake, her eyes blazing. "You," she spat. "You're the poison in all of this." You whispered lies in her ears. You filled her head with promises of wealth, of a life of luxury, if she left him for you. Silence, deafening silence, then chaos. The guests exploded into murmurs. Some gasped so loud it echoed against the walls. Others put hands to their mouths in disbelief. A few turned, whispering frantically, unable to process what they were hearing. The bride covered her face with trembling hands. "Stop, stop, please stop," she begged, her voice cracking. "Not here, not now." The groom's chest heaved as he tried to regain control. "She's lying. She's crazy. Don't listen to her," he shouted, but even his own voice trembled with fear. The man in the gray suit finally stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "No," he said, "she's not lying." He glanced at the girl beside him. Her wide, dark eyes were filled with disbelief, horror, but also something else. Strength, because for the first time, she realized the mighty weren't so mighty after all. Their power was built on lies, on pride, On illusions. The man continued, his gaze scanning every single face in the crowd. Everything you heard is true. His voice dropped, heavy as thunder. She betrayed me. She left me. She sold herself to the highest bidder. And this, he gestured toward the groom, was the price. A collective gasp swallowed the entire chapel. The bride shook her head desperately. No, please stop, please stop. She whimpered, This isn't how it was supposed to happen. The groom grabbed her arm. You said no one would ever find out. You promised me. He snarled through clenched teeth. She yanked her arm away, screaming. You said he would never show up. You promised me. And right there, in front of everyone, the truth shattered the fragile image they had tried so hard to build. The wedding was officially over. The tension was unbearable. It felt like the entire chapel was about to explode. The bride stood trembling, mascara running down her cheeks, her perfect white dress now looking more like a symbol of shame than celebration. The groom paced back and forth like a cornered animal, his hands pulling at his hair, his face twisted between rage and panic. Meanwhile, the man stood tall, unshaken, his cowboy hat casting a shadow over his sharp, cold eyes. His grip around the girl's hand was firm, protective, as if silently telling her, You're safe. No one will ever hurt you again. The girl, though overwhelmed, refused to step back. Her breathing was heavy, her hands trembling slightly, but her spine stayed straight, her chin high, her presence undeniable. The guests whispered frantically, some shaking their heads, others smirking in satisfaction, because deep down, even those who pretended to be shocked were enjoying every second of this disaster. The man's voice finally broke through the chaos. Calm, controlled, devastating. It's funny, he said, looking around slowly. All of you came here to witness a wedding, but what you're witnessing is a lesson. His gaze locked onto the bride. A lesson. That betrayal has a price. The bride sobbed, her hands clutching her chest, as if she could hold her shame together with her fingers. Stop, please stop, she whimpered. This wasn't supposed to happen. But the man took a slow, deliberate step forward. His boots echoed against the wooden floor, each step louder than the last. No, it wasn't, he said sharply. It wasn't supposed to happen, because you thought I'd never show up. You thought I'd stay quiet, humiliated, crushed, broken. His voice rose, filled with fire. But what you forgot is that I am not the kind of man who stays down. The crowd gasped. A few clapped their hands over their mouths. Some exchanged glances, shaking their heads like they couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The groom lunged forward, pointing a trembling finger. You've made your point. Now get out. Both of you. Leave, he barked, his voice cracking under the weight of his own humiliation. But the girl who once would have hidden, who would have bowed her head and walked away, took a step forward. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, steady. It sliced through the air like a knife. No. Silence. All eyes turned to her. The groom blinked. The bride gasped. Even a man beside her turned his head slightly, surprised but proud. No, she repeated, stronger this time. We're not leaving. Not until every single person here knows who you really are. The groom's jaw dropped. Who do you think you are? He stammered, his voice shaking. The girl inhaled deeply, holding her ground. Who am I? She looked around the chapel, meeting the eyes of every guest. Even those who moments ago had judged her, whispered about her, looked at her like dirt. I'm the girl you all ignored. The one you crossed the street to avoid. The one you looked down on, as if I was nothing. Her voice trembled. Not from fear, but from the sheer weight of years. Years of humiliation, hunger, cold, loneliness. But guess what? Her eyes burned with fire. I'm not nothing. And neither is anyone else who's ever been treated like me. Today, all of you, every single one of you, gets to learn that worth isn't measured by money or by dresses or by how shiny your shoes are. The room fell into stunned silence. Some lowered their heads, ashamed. Others stared wide-eyed, not knowing whether to breathe, cry, or applaud. The man watched her, a lump forming in his throat. His jaw tightened. His grip on her hand tightened, because at that moment, he realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about something bigger, The groom stepped back, his hands shaking, face drained of color. The bride collapsed onto the steps in front of the altar, sobbing uncontrollably, covering her face, as her perfect little world shattered before her very eyes. And just when it seemed like it couldn't get any worse, another voice rose from the back of the chapel. "That's not all," it said. "There's something else everyone needs to know." The crowd turned as a new figure stepped into view, holding something in their hands, something that would destroy what was left of the groom's and bride's reputation forever. All heads snapped toward the back of the chapel. A man stood there, tall, serious, with a leather folder in his hands. His eyes were sharp, and the tension in his jaw said everything before he even opened his mouth. I didn't want to be the one to do this," he began, his voice trembling but determined. "But I can't stay silent anymore." Gasps rippled through the crowd. People shifted in their seats, gripping the arms of their chairs, some whispering, some frozen with wide eyes. The bride lifted her tear-streaked face, horror blooming across her features. "No, no, please no," she whispered, shaking her head rapidly. "You wouldn't dare." The groom's eyes darted toward the man, then toward the folder. His entire body stiffened. Panic flashed in his eyes. "Don't," he hissed, his voice low, dangerous. You don't know what you're doing." But the man ignored him. He stepped forward, opened the folder, and pulled out several sheets of paper. "These," he said, holding them high, "are copies of the property transfer contracts, bank statements, proof that this wedding was never about love." A collective gasp shook the entire room. "No," the bride whimpered. "No, no, no." The man continued, louder now, his voice filled with the weight of truth. 2 weeks before this wedding, this man, he pointed directly at the groom, coerced her into transferring part of her ex-fiancé's land into his name. And it doesn't stop there. People began standing. Some clutched their chests in shock. Others whispered so loud it filled the air like static electricity. "There's more," he continued. "A secret account, hidden transactions, payments made to silence people, including the priest that was supposed to officiate today." The bride broke down completely, collapsing on her knees, hands covering her face. "Stop. Please, make it stop," she sobbed. "This wasn't supposed to happen." The groom lunged toward the man with the documents. "You liar. You filthy liar," he screamed. But before he could reach him, the man in the gray suit, the cowboy, the ex, stepped between them. With one sharp, brutal shove, he pushed the groom back so hard that he stumbled, nearly falling. "Don't you dare touch him." His voice was low, rough as gravel, sharp as a whip. "You've done enough damage. And now, everyone sees you for what you are." The groom stood there, panting like a cornered animal, his fists trembling, his face burning with rage. But there was nothing left to say, nothing left to hide. The man with the folder stepped forward, handing the documents to several guests. "See for yourselves," he said. "Everything's here. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal." The crowd surrounded him, snatching the papers, scanning them, gasping, murmuring, shaking their heads. "Oh my God, it's true. I can't believe this." The bride, still on the floor, rocked back and forth, sobbing like a broken child. The groom stood frozen, his chest heaving, his hands clenched, his world shattered. And then, the girl stepped forward. Her voice was soft, calm. "You know," she said, her eyes scanning the bride, the groom, the entire crowd. "For years, I thought I was the lowest person in this town, the one everyone looked down on, the one who didn't deserve a seat at your tables." Her gaze hardened. "Turns out, I was wrong." She looked directly at the bride. "Because the real shame wasn't mine." Silence. Heavy. Crushing. And for the first time in her entire life, she wasn't the one being humiliated. She was the one watching them fall. For a moment, the world stood completely still. The bride collapsed on the floor, sobbed uncontrollably. Her perfect hair was a mess, her makeup ruined, her once flawless image shattered beyond repair. The groom stood there, motionless, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His hands were clenched, so tight his knuckles were white. His face, once full of arrogance, was now drained of all color. He looked hollow, defeated. The guests, they were no longer whispering. Now they spoke openly, shamelessly. I always knew something was off about them. Did you see those documents? It's all true. How embarrassing. Right here, in front of everyone. Some are already pulling out their phones, snapping pictures, recording videos. Because if this town loved anything more than gossip, it was evidence. The man in the gray suit, calm, stoic, powerful, watched it all with his jaw tight, his hands still gently holding the girl's. She stood taller than ever, her chest rising steadily, her lips pressed together in a line that was neither a smile nor a frown, but something stronger, something that radiated dignity. Then, the man finally spoke. His voice was calm, but filled with authority. "I think," he said, scanning the crowd, "this wedding is officially canceled." A wave of gasps followed. Some guests actually laughed nervously. Others nodded in agreement, as if waiting for someone to say it out loud. The groom snapped. "Get out!" he screamed, his face red with rage, his hands shaking. "Get out of here, both of you, now!" But the man didn't flinch. He slowly turned his head toward him, adjusting his cowboy hat with a subtle, confident tilt. "No," he said coldly. "You don't get to tell me what to do. Not anymore." The groom lunged forward like a wild animal, but two men from the crowd stepped in front of him, pushing him back. "Enough," one said, shaking his head. "You brought this on yourself." The bride, still on her knees, crawled toward the groom, grabbing his pant leg. "Make it stop. Make it stop," she sobbed. "Please do something." But the groom kicked her hand away, his face twisting with pure, raw anger. You ruined everything." He barked at her. "This is all your fault." The entire chapel went silent again. And then, the man turned to the girl beside him. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice softer, warmer. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening but strong. "More than ever," she answered. Together, they turned, hand in hand, walked slowly, proudly, toward the doors. The crowd parted for them, like the sea splitting for something greater. Heads bowed, some in shame, some in respect, some in pure disbelief. Just as they reached the door, the man paused, looked over his shoulder one last time. His voice was sharp, calm, deadly. "And one more thing," he said. "Thank you, both of you, for reminding me of one very important lesson." Everyone leaned in, waiting for the final blow. He tipped his hat slightly, his eyes narrowing. "That real worth has nothing to do with money." His gaze dropped to the groom, and everything to do with honor. And with that, he stepped outside, leaving behind a chapel filled with shattered dreams, broken lies, and the wreckage of two people who thought they were untouchable. But the story wasn't over yet, because as the doors closed behind them, what neither of them expected was waiting outside. Something that would change their lives forever. As the heavy wooden doors of the chapel shut behind them, the noise inside faded, replaced by something else. Silence. A strange, heavy silence, followed by the sound of the wind sweeping through the dirt road, carrying dust and dry leaves. But then another sound. Voices. Footsteps. Murmurs. The man and the girl glanced at each other, their hands still tightly intertwined, their chests rising and falling, their hearts still pounding from the chaos they had just left behind. But standing right there, outside the chapel, was something neither of them expected. A crowd. Not just any crowd. Not the rich, not the arrogant wedding guests, but people from the town. Simple people. People from the markets, from the farms, from the streets. People who knew her, who had seen her sitting on the sidewalks, sleeping under trees, walking barefoot under the scorching sun, begging for a piece of bread. And now they were there, watching. For a terrifying moment, she felt her throat close. Her worst fear crawled back. They're here to mock me, to laugh, to point, to remind me that I'll never belong. But then, something happened. A single clap, then another, and another, until the entire crowd erupted into applause. Applause. Not of pity, not of mockery, but of respect, admiration. Tears instantly flooded her eyes. Her lips trembled. Her knees almost buckled. "You did it," someone shouted from the crowd. "You showed them. You stood up for all of us," another voice added. An older woman stepped forward, her hands rough from years of work, her eyes moist with emotion. "You showed them that dignity doesn't come from money, but from the heart," she said, her voice shaking. The girl covered her mouth with both hands, overwhelmed. Her entire body trembled. But this time, it wasn't from fear. The man beside her looked down, eyes softening, his grip on her tightening. "You see," he whispered, This is who you really are. This is where you truly belong." She shook her head, trying to hold back the tears. "No," she whispered, "I never thought that anyone." But before she could finish, something else happened. From behind the crowd, a man stepped forward. Not young. His clothes were worn, his hat old and dusty. His boots cracked, but his eyes were sharp, focused. He walked slowly toward them, then stopped, staring straight at her. Her breath caught. Something about him, something familiar, something she couldn't explain, pulled at her chest. "It can't be," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man removed his hat slowly, pressing it against his chest. His lips trembled. I've been searching for years." His voice cracked. I thought you didn't survive." The world faded around her. Her ears rang. Her heart raced. Her voice barely escaped her lips. "Dad!" Gasps exploded from the crowd. People turned, eyes widening, hands covering mouths. The man nodded, tears already streaming down his weathered face. Yes, me, Nina. It's me. I lost you when you were just a baby. They told me you were gone. That you," his voice broke completely, "that you didn't survive, but you did. You did." Her knees finally gave out, but the man beside her caught her in his arms before she could fall. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. I can't believe this," she cried. All these years, I thought I was alone." Her father stepped forward, dropping to his knees, wrapping his arms around both of them. "No, Hija, you were never alone, never. I never stopped searching, never stopped praying." The crowd stood in absolute silence, tears in many eyes. Not a single whisper of judgment, only respect. And as the man held the girl, his girl, and the cowboy stood there, embracing them both, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't just a story of revenge anymore. This was the story of a life stolen and finally reclaimed. But fate still had one more surprise waiting. Tears streamed down her face as her father held her tightly, his hands shaking as he stroked her hair, repeating over and over again, as if afraid she might disappear. "You're here. You're alive. You're really here." The man in the gray suit stood close, his hand still protectively resting on her shoulder, his other arm around her back. His jaw clenched, but not out of anger this time, out of pure, overwhelming emotion. He had fought so many battles in life. He had stood against betrayal, humiliation, greed. But this moment, this reunion, was the most powerful thing he had ever witnessed. The crowd stood in total silence. Some were wiping their eyes. Others pressed their hands to their mouths, unable to process the scene unfolding before them. And then, the whispers began again. But this time not cruel, not judgmental. "It's her father. After all these years. My God, this is a miracle." The girl pulled back slightly, her hands trembling as she cupped her father's face, studying him, memorizing him. "How?" she whispered, barely able to speak. "How is this possible? How did you lose me?" Her father's eyes clouded with pain. "Years ago," he started, his voice breaking, "there was a fire, an accident. When you were just a baby, they told me you didn't make it. They lied to me." His hand shook harder. Someone took you. I searched everywhere, but," his voice cracked, I thought you were gone forever." She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. I always thought I was abandoned." Her voice trembled, "that nobody wanted me." Her father shook his head violently, tears falling down his weathered face. Never, not a single day. You were never unwanted. Never." The man in the gray suit tightened his arm around her, his voice low, rough with emotion. "You were never alone. Not then, not now, not ever again." She looked up at him, her eyes overflowing with gratitude, with something deeper, something that had been growing between them from the moment he reached out his hand to her, on that street, that day when their worlds collided. And then, a voice interrupted the fragile, beautiful moment. A voice filled with venom. Oh, how touching. The three turned sharply. Standing on the chapel steps was the groom. His face, a mask of pure hatred. His eyes wild. His fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. So this is the game now? He sneered. The poor little beggar girl. Turns out to be someone's long-lost daughter. How convenient. The man in the gray suit stepped forward immediately, placing himself between the girl and the groom. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. Careful, he growled. Careful with every word that comes out of your mouth. The groom let out a bitter, hollow laugh. What? You think this changes anything? You think anyone cares? She's still trash. Always will be. No name. No future. No place in this town. But before the man could speak, it was her father who stepped forward. Slowly. Firmly. Oh, you're very wrong about that. His voice was lower, sharper than a knife, because the land you walk on, the roads you drive on, the farms that feed this town, he paused, half of it belongs to me. A shockwave hit the crowd. Gasps. Hands flying to mouths. Eyes wide. What? Did he just say? No, it can't be. The father continued, taking another step closer, his eyes burning into the groom's. And now, he glanced at his daughter, then back. Everything that's mine is hers. The groom stumbled back. His face lost all color. No, that's not possible. He stammered, his mouth dry. No. The man in the gray suit tilted his head slightly, a slow, knowing smile creeping across his face. Guess she's not the beggar anymore, he said coldly. But you're about to find out what it feels like to have nothing. The crowd exploded in whispers, in gasps, in hands grabbing chests, in heads shaking in disbelief. And the girl who once stood at the bottom of everything, now stood taller than anyone. But fate wasn't done yet, because just when everyone thought the last bomb had dropped, the groom screamed, "This isn't over. I swear, this isn't over." And the way his eyes burned promised that chaos was far from finished. For a moment, nobody dared breathe. The groom stood trembling, his face contorted with rage, humiliation, and pure hatred. His hands clenched into trembling fists, his jaw tight enough to shatter teeth. His world was crumbling, publicly, completely, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The man in the gray suit stood in front of him, his arms crossed, eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his cowboy hat. Calm, unmoved, but his entire presence screamed power and protection. The girl, no, the woman now. A woman who just minutes ago had believed herself worthless, invisible, broken. She stood tall, her hand resting in her father's, her other hand held tightly by the man who had seen her value long before anyone else did. Her father stepped forward, his voice low, deep, but sharper than any blade. "It is over," he said, "for you." The groom shook his head violently, pointing his trembling finger at the three standing before him. "You think you've won?" He spat, his voice cracking between rage and despair. "You think this changes anything? I still have power. I still have friends." But from behind him, another voice rose. "Not anymore." The crowd turned. A group of influential men, landowners, businessmen, figures who once stood shoulder to shoulder with the groom, stepped forward, their faces blank, cold, and disgusted. "We don't associate with thieves, with liars, with cowards," one of them said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Another crossed his arms. "Consider every deal we ever had canceled. Every door closed." Gasps. More murmurs. Some people even backed away from the groom, as if his very presence was toxic. The groom's chest heaved. His eyes darted desperately from one face to another, searching, hoping, pleading silently for someone to defend him. But no one did. Not a single soul. His breath became ragged. His hands flew to his hair, pulling at it, shaking his head in disbelief. No, I know. This isn't happening." He screamed. The bride, still sitting on the chapel steps, broken, makeup smeared, her dress stained with dust and tears, didn't even look at him. Her face was buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking in silent sobs. And then, the man in the gray suit stepped forward, slowly, calmly, each step heavier than the last. He stood inches from the groom. His voice dropped, low, deadly. "Let me teach you something," he said. "The things you build with lies, with betrayal, with greed, will always come crashing down." He leaned closer, his eyes cold as steel. "And when they do, the ones you stepped on to get there will be the ones watching." The groom's breathing turned wild. His hands trembled. His entire body trembled. His lips curled back, but no words came. No threats. No insults. Nothing. Because there was nothing left. The man stepped back, returning to the girl's side, taking her hand. He squeezed it gently, looking down at her, his voice softening. "It's done," he whispered. "It's finally done." She looked up at him, her eyes glassy, her lips trembling, but this time, with something else. Not fear, not sadness, but love. A love so real, so deep, so overwhelming that it stole her breath. Her father stepped forward, placing a hand on both their shoulders. "It's time to leave this place behind," he said, "to leave the past right where it belongs." She nodded, blinking back tears. "Yes, I'm ready," she whispered, "ready to start over." The man smiled softly, a real smile, a smile he hadn't worn in years. "With me?" he asked, voice lower, deeper, full of meaning. Her heart skipped, her breath caught. She smiled, a smile so radiant it could have lit up the entire sky. "With you," she whispered. But just as they turned to leave, a voice echoed from the chapel steps. Weak, broken, but still burning with one last ember of bitterness. "You'll regret this," the groom hissed. "Both of you. You'll regret it." But the only response was silence, and the sound of boots walking away, together, toward something new, toward something better. But fate wasn't quite finished yet. The dust danced under the sunlight as they walked away from that place, hand in hand, side by side, leaving behind not just a wedding, but an entire past filled with humiliation, scars, and wounds that would never open again. The girl glanced at him, her heart pounding, not with fear, not with shame, but with something she had never truly felt before. Safety, belonging, love. Her father walked beside them, his weathered face finally soft, finally peaceful, like a man who had carried a mountain on his shoulders for years and could finally breathe again. As they reached the edge of the town square, the man in the gray suit slowed down. His hand tightened around hers, and when she looked up, she saw it, the softness in his eyes, the vulnerability hidden beneath all that strength. He removed his cowboy hat, held it against his chest, and turned fully toward her. "Listen," his voice was lower now, rough, but not with anger. "When I asked you to come with me to that wedding, it was for revenge. I won't lie about that. I was angry, hurt, broken." He took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "But something happened, something I never expected." Her heart raced, her lips parted, but no words came. He stepped closer, so close she could feel his breath. His hands found hers, holding them like something precious. "You saved me," he said, his voice cracking. "You reminded me what matters. You reminded me who I really am." Tears welled in her eyes, her breath caught in her chest. "And now, if you'll let me," he paused, his lips trembling just slightly. "I don't want this to be just about today, or about the past. I don't want this to end here." Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide, her heart threatening to explode. Are you saying?" she whispered. He smiled, a real smile, a smile that had been buried beneath years of pain, betrayal, and loneliness. He reached into his pocket, slowly, carefully, and pulled out a small, simple box. Her hands trembled as he opened it, revealing a ring, not extravagant, not flashy, but beautiful, timeless, a symbol, not of wealth, not of status, but of everything they had become together. He dropped to one knee. Gasps echoed around them from the small crowd that had followed in silence, watching this unfold like the final scene of a story they would never forget. "Will you?" his voice cracked, his eyes shining. Will you stay by my side? Will you marry me? For a second, the entire world disappeared. There was no dust, no whispers, no past, no pain, just them. Her knees buckled. Tears streamed down her face. Her hands trembled as she covered her mouth, shaking her head, not in denial, but because she couldn't believe this was real. Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Yes. He stood, grabbing her by the waist, lifting her off the ground as she burst into laughter and tears all at once. He spun her around, holding her tight, as the crowd erupted into applause. Her father stepped forward, wiping his eyes, his voice trembling. Never have I seen something so right, so beautiful, he whispered. As the man set her down, their foreheads pressed together. His hands cupped her face. No more pain, he whispered. No more loneliness. No more looking down. From today, you walk beside me, as my partner, my equal, my wife. She nodded, her hands gripping his shirt tightly. And you're my home, she whispered back. Always. And as the sun set over the dusty hills, casting a golden glow over them, the past finally, fully faded. But life had one final surprise, because as they turned toward the horizon, ready to start their new life together, a shadow appeared in the distance. A figure, someone who hadn't yet finished what they started. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long, golden shadows over the dusty road, the sound of footsteps grew louder behind them. Heavy, slow, full of something dark, something bitter. The man in the gray suit instinctively stepped slightly in front of her, protective as always. Her hand gripped his arm, and her father's eyes narrowed as he turned toward the approaching figure. And there he was, the groom. His tie was gone. His hair was a mess. His face twisted with something between desperation and madness. You think you won, he spat, his voice ragged, broken. You think this is over? The man didn't flinch. His jaw tightened, his eyes turning to steel. It is over, he said firmly. Go home, before you lose what little dignity you have left. The groom shook his head violently, almost laughing, but it wasn't laughter. It was something darker. No, you ruined me. You ruined me, he roared, his voice echoing down the empty street. I have nothing left because of you. He reached into his jacket. For a second, everyone froze. Her breath caught. Her father's hands twitched, ready to react. The man in the gray suit stepped forward, body tense, ready for anything. But when the groom pulled his hand out, it wasn't a weapon. It was a crumpled paper, a deed, a contract, torn, stained, worthless. He threw it to the ground. This was everything, and now it's gone. He screamed. And for what? For her. He pointed at the girl, his fingers shaking with rage. A filthy, useless beggar. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. And then, the man stepped forward. His voice was no longer angry, no longer filled with vengeance. It was sad, deeply sad. Look at yourself, he said quietly. Look at what you've become. You had everything, and you lost it. Not because of me, not because of her, but because of the man you see in the mirror. The groom stumbled back, shaking his head. No, but the words died in his mouth. The man turned, wrapping his arm around her, his other hand resting on her father's shoulder. Let's go, he said, softly but firmly. This is no longer our story. They walked away, slowly, proudly, leaving behind the ruins of greed, betrayal, and hate. The groom collapsed onto his knees, hands tangled in his hair, screaming at the empty sky. But no one turned back, not even once. As they reached the hill overlooking the town, the breeze picked up. The sun painted everything in gold. Her father looked at her, his eyes filled with something he hadn't felt in decades. Peace. You're home now, he whispered. You always were meant to be. The man in the gray suit stopped, turned to her, cupping her face in both hands. From today on, no more looking back, he said, only forward. Only us. She smiled, tears sparkling in her eyes. Only us, she echoed. Forever. They kissed. A kiss not of fairy tales, not of fantasies, but of truth, of scars healed, of souls finally finding where they belonged. Sometimes life teaches us that true worth has nothing to do with money, with appearances, or with social status. True worth comes from the heart, from dignity, from the strength to stand up, no matter how many times life tries to push you down. This story reminds us that God always works in mysterious ways, that when doors close, He opens windows you never imagined, and that no matter how hard life gets, the truth always comes to light. Justice always arrives, and love always finds its way. Never let anyone make you believe you're worthless. You are valuable. You are enough. And your past does not define your future. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. Where are you watching this video from? I would love to read your message. And remember, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. May God bless you, your family, and may He always guide your steps.